Hey, Walter Sorrells back with another Pops Knife Making Project of the Month. Today, sharpening A to Z. This month for my Pops Project of the Month, we're not building a knife, we're building a skill set. I'll take you through the use of 4 totally different knife sharpening systems from old school to new school. And I'll show you how the same principles underlie all of them. As always, our Pops Project of the Month is sponsored by Pops Knife Supplies. Every single tool that I'm going to show today can be found at Pops, and most of them are extremely affordable, simple tools. Learn how to use them right, and you can have wicked shaving sharp tools in the field, in the kitchen, your shop, or your pocket. Today's video is, of course, sponsored by Pops Knife Supplies. Pops has everything you need for knife making. Steel for both stock removal guides and hammer bangers, a huge supply of handle materials including all kinds of woods, bone, horn, antler, tons of cool micarta including Pops' specialty vintage micarta, all sorts of abrasives including every kind of belt you can think of, sandpaper, specialty abrasives, fasteners, tools, you name it. But here's the secret sauce. All 4 partners at Pops are pro knife makers, so if you need a little guidance on what kind of belt or steel or sandpaper is right for the knife that you're making, there are folks right there on hand to help you figure out exactly what you need. So before we jump in and start moving metal, let's talk super quickly about what we're aiming to do. When a knife gets dull or when you've just completed it, either one, the cutting edge is either flat, if you've just ground it, or it's kind of rounded off where it got dull. So if we chop a dull knife in half, here's what it looks like. It's a sort of triangular shape with a sort of flat or round part where it's supposed to cut. All that we're trying to do when we sharpen a knife is to bring this edge, which is dull, flat, or rounded, to a nice, crisp triangle. That's it. Now, most Western style knives, whether you're talking about chef's knives, hunting knives, pocket knives, whatever, have a main bevel here, that's the knifey part, and then a little micro bevel here. Asian knives and Scandi grinds are the exceptions to the rule, but if you walk into Walmart, Pottery Barn, Cabela's, Dick's Sporting Goods, Home Depot, whatever, and you buy a knife, it's going to look like this. Main bevel, micro bevel. And the only part you're trying to change is this tiny little micro bevel. You're just using an abrasive, a stone, a grinding belt, diamonds, whatever, doesn't matter, to grind off a little metal and make that triangle. So how do you do that? You put it on the sharpening surface and you maintain exactly the same angle, grinding away until the rounded off bit goes away and you got a nice sharp triangle. After you've got your triangle, you use increasingly fine abrasives to keep grinding that exact same angle until you get it to a level of sharpness that makes you happy. Then you quit. Simple as that. Typically the angle of the main bevel of the knife is say 5 to 10 degrees, but the micro bevel, the cutting edge, will be somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 degrees. End of the day, not that important what the angle is. A lot of people stress about that. But the most important thing is just that it's consistent. Now the devil's in the details, of course, so let's start with a method they've been using since Pharaoh made the pyramids, the sharpening stone. In this case, we're using a water stone. Some stones are usually worked dry, some are oiled, some wet. The idea is just that you don't want all the little bits of steel that you're grinding off to build up and pack in there so the little abrasive grains stop cutting. That's the function of the water. Now, in this case, before using the stone, you just drop it in water for 10 minutes or so, basically till it stops bubbling. Rough abrasive here, fine here. Then we'll stick it in this cradle with a little water to keep it moist. If it glazes over at a certain point, just scrub it off with your fingers and some water. In all sharpening, you want to start rough, get that little triangle going that we mentioned, and then, and only then, move to finer abrasives. In this case, flipping it over and working the fine side of the stone. So my goal here is to push the knife's micro bevel across this stone, wearing off the dull part until we get that crisp triangle that makes it a cutting edge. And we want to keep it exactly the same through the stroke, stroke after stroke. In the good old days, you had to do this more or less by feel. But now, this clever little stone and the tray that it sits on have little guides at the end. 15 degrees for kitchen knives, or you can flip it over and it's got a 17-degree guide for thicker outdoor knives and that kind of thing. So you just set your knife on that guide, feel that it's nice and flat, and then you push it across the stone, focusing on keeping that same angle stem to stern. Notice that I'm working toward the edge, pushing the edge into the abrasives. I want even pressure all the way out to the tip, just maintaining that exact angle. You're trying to use your eyeballs and feel to maintain it. But with this little guide here, you always know you're at least starting at the perfect angle. Flip it over and work the other side. There's a tendency to kind of lift your hand up as you get out towards the tip, so just try and fight that. Keep that same angle. With a dull knife, you probably want to do 10 and 10 or 5 and 5, so you're flipping it over and repeating the exact same number on each side. As I get closer to fully sharp, I'll decrease the number of strokes on each side. The tip is always the hardest part, so keep your attention on not lifting the tip and changing the angle. Pretty simple, really. Just be patient. The duller the knife, the more time it takes. The biggest problem most people have when sharpening on stones is that they get impatient on the foundation stage and quit too early. But how early is too early? Here's the way I do it. If you look straight down at the knife with an overhead light and you can see a little shiny line running down in the middle of the cutting edge, that means you still have more material to take off. Eventually, that shiny line, which shows the dull part of the knife, will just disappear. And that means you've got your edge established. You can confirm this by feeling with your thumbnail. If you can kind of nick or scrape your nail when you slide it back away from the edge on one side of the bevel, it'll only be on one side, that means that you've established what's known as a wire edge, which is a little tiny curl of steel that runs down that edge. And you'll need to get rid of that before all's said and done. But if it's there now, perfect time to move on to the fine grit side of the stone. What do you do there? Well, just repeat the exact same process. Same angle, same everything. If you've established the edge correctly, this really should be pretty easy. 10, 20, 30 strokes on each side. Should be a matter of a couple minutes. And then you've got a nice edge. If you give it one or two final passes super gently, you're probably sharp enough at this point to cut the proverbial overripe tomato. But there's one more step that's the real secret to sharpness. So stick around, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, let's turn to something a little rough and ready, a field sharpener. If you've watched any of my videos about sharpening in the past, you'll know I'm a big fan of diamond sharpeners. Basically, they're just tiny little industrial diamond abrasives bonded to an ultra-flat piece of steel. Nobody gives you a gold star in life because you spent endless amounts of time sharpening. Diamonds cut fast, and that gets you back to using your knife instead of monkeying around sharpening it. Okay, so guess what? Exact same principles at play here as we showed on the stone. Use the little guides to establish an angle, then sweep it along, pushing toward the edge until you get rid of the shiny bit and establish that wire edge. This system, just like the stone, has a heavy grit side and a fine grit side. If your knife's ultra dull or you're establishing a particular angle for the first time, start on the heavy side. On the other hand, if you have a reasonably sharp blade with the right angle established, just jump right to the fine side and go after it. You'll be amazed at how fast these diamonds cut, even the fine ones. Okay, so we've got our wire edge. Now, wait a sec, what's this? It looks like a little strip of suede stuck on here, and in fact, that's exactly what it is. Remember I said there was a secret to squeezing that last drop of sharpness out of your knife? Well, here it is, the strop. We've all seen movies where the barber's whipping his straight razor around on this strip of leather. Exact same deal here. So let's talk stropping. Stropping means taking a piece of leather and charging it with a little bit of polishing compound. This is green compound, basically just tiny pieces of a nickel compound suspended in wax. You rub a little into the strap, and then we'll use that to accomplish two things. First, we're getting rid of that tiny little wire edge that we've talked about before, and second, we're polishing the micro bevel to make it as slippery and smooth as possible. The smoother the edge, the less resistance it offers, the better it cuts. When I use a strop, I try to increase the angle just a hair, maybe a degree, which will assure you of taking off that wire edge. Don't hyperventilate about trying to be exact about it, but if you're going to err here, err on the side of going slightly steeper. Now, here comes the main difference between the strop and the stones. You're dragging it instead of pushing it. Obviously, pushing would just chop right into the leather. Same basic idea though, you're just scrubbing away stem to stern, get the whole edge on every stroke. Again, I personally start about 10 times or so on each side and then start decreasing the numbers as I work down towards single strokes. Key point, steady as she goes, same angle every time. Don't do like all the barbers in the movie where they change the angle as they're coming out of each swipe. See that? Remember, all those barbers in movies are actually, actors. So, the strop on this sharpener, hey, same principle as the big one here, it's just smaller. Otherwise, no difference at all. Okay, check out the little brother. They build this as a pocket knife sharpener, but it's great for throwing in the backpack when you're going out hunting or hiking. And how does it work? Guess what? Exactly the same as all the others. Put your blade on the guide, go till that little shiny line on the edge disappears or till you have a wire edge that'll snag your fingernail, and you're done. Okay, so those are all great for home or field, but what about the knife making shop? Here is what I use. It's a sharpening system from Braid. If you've got an Braid grinder, it's plug and play. If you don't, I'm sure you could adapt it, but honestly, it'll probably take a little work. I actually made something like this for a video a few years back, but I never really used it. Why? Didn't work that great. This, fantastic. I use it on every single knife I make now. Here's the basic setup. I place the knife in the clamp, tighten the thumb screw, good to go. Then I slide this adjustable rest into the lower shoe on my Braid. I use a cheapo electronic angle finder to establish the angle. Then you just grind away. On knives that I've just made that have no previously established micro bevel, I'll start with 120 grit ceramic like this VSM X-weight belt. Same as always, just go till you make that wire edge. Now, here's where things can get potentially tricky. My Braid has the capability of running backwards. I do all of my sharpening running backwards, meaning running the belt away from the cutting edge. The issue here is that once your knife is sharp, if you have a fray or a thin belt, that cutting edge can grab and fling your knife, and that's no fun, especially if it sticks in your foot. Now, this isn't a problem with a heavy X-weight belt like the VSM. They're very flat, very stable, and strong. But if you don't have reverse capability, once you go to a high grit belt like this 3M Micron belt, I recommend you consider taking it out of the sharpener and doing the final operation edge down, like so. You've already got your edge nicely established, so this isn't too hard to do properly. And same deal for the next step. This is a product I love, a leather 2x72 strop or honing belt. If you're new to these, they're a little bumpy right out of the box, so I recommend putting them on the grinder and just running them at medium speed for a while. They'll also stretch, and that's something important for you to be aware of. Anyway, once you've got the strop sort of conditioned or mellowed out a little, whatever you want to call it, charge it with a little green polishing compound, and then you run it exactly like you did the sharpening belts. Pro tip, back the rest out a degree or two, just like I recommended doing on the strop. The belt has some give, so that extra angle helps concentrate its polishing action on the cutting edge rather than just sort of rounding off the point where the micro bevel meets the rest of the blade. Now, obviously you have to run this one away from the cutting edge. Run your edge into this belt and you are 100% guaranteed of flinging your knife. So if your grinder doesn't have reverse capability, obviously you're going to have to freehand grind it and run it edge down. Other than that though, same basic idea as the sharpening stage, just run it back and forth, more times and harder pressure to start, then nice and light for a few single passes on each side at the end. And once you're done, it'll do this. All right, guys, so that's it. The keys to success and happiness in sharpening: first, consistent angle; second, work your way up from heavy to fine grit abrasives; and third, work that strop. All right, thanks for watching, and keep those knives sharp. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe and make sure that you click on that bell so you get notified of all the latest videos. Want to buy a knife from me? Check out my modern blades at tacticsarmory.com. Digging the channel? You can support our video making efforts on Patreon. You know, I've been banging away on these videos for like 10 years, so I hope you'll show some love for all that hard work. Link in the cards and descriptions. Finally, if you're interested in making Japanese swords, check out my full line of Japanese sword videos where I show how to forge Japanese swords as well as how to polish them and how to make fittings, handles, and scabbards. WalterSorrellsBlades.com.